are more than 100 unique styles of beer, each with their own set of ingredients, process, guidelines, history, and experience. If you're a beer lover, an industry leader, or somewhere in between, a better knowledge of beer style will improve your life and your work.
Welcome to A Sense of Beer Style, essential beer style training for those who want to lead in food and beverage. I'm Julia Herz.
And I'm Jeremy Storton.
We're advanced Cicerones, beer judges, home brewers, and we're excited to guide you through the vast and wonderful world of beer styles.
Welcome back to the Sense of Beer Style, everyone. Welcome back, Julia.
Hello, hello.
This is another fun episode because I love the story behind this beer. This is a beer, and I'm gonna leave you. You probably know what you're listening to because you clicked on this and you saw the title. But the story behind this Witbier is this is a beer that almost went completely extinct. And if it wasn't for a milkman in Belgium who just loved this beer style and wanted to resurrect it and reopen a brewery to brew the style, it would have been lost and gone forever. But we can thank Pierre Celis in the 1950s for reopening the brewery, which eventually started brewing the style and bringing the style back to the world through the beer Hoegaarden. Then through all the business stuff, and ended up selling it to Interbrew, which became part of AB. He left, and of all places in the world, moved to Austin, Texas, and opened up Celis Brewery, and now it's a family-owned brewery. That last time I checked, despite some recent challenges, is still alive and well and brewing the style from presumably from his recipe book. So this is a great style, and you can find some good examples of this. It is pretty well brewed by a lot of craft brewers. It's a wonderful, drinkable beer, but if in doubt, you can always go to Austin, Texas, and go to Celis Brewery and taste it as close to the source as you can. But that's the quick story of Witbier. It is a wheat. It is pale. It has coriander and orange peel. It's Belgian inspired. It's just wonderful. But let's talk. And I'm sorry, I think I stole a little bit of your thunder, Julia. Forgive me. But let's talk about the ingredients and how this beer is made.
That's fine. And I definitely can add to what you shared, where Christine Celis is the daughter of Pierre Celis in Austin, Texas, and did such a great job. I personally toured the brewery with her a few years ago, and what a testament. Original brew vessels are contained in that brewery. And obviously, as Jeremy said, the original recipes are still being brewed. So it's alive and well, this Witbier story and style. Previous versions, though, might have had more of an essence and emphasis on lactic, a little bit of sour. The more modern versions absolutely don't. And so you've got these ingredients, no matter what, if it's a traditional or a modern version of that wheat. And unmalted wheat is such a big aspect of this beer. Unmalted wheat means that it's not going to be a fermentable per se. It's going to be about body, flavor, and color and mouthfeel. And it's 30 to 60%, if you're brewing these beers, of the percentage of your overall base fermentable is unmalted wheat. And then barley malt, which would traditionally be Pilsner malt or very light color, pale type of malted barley. And then, you can have raw oats to this. 5 to 10% is what the guidelines call for in many recipes. Oats are in many things, from juicy or hazy IPAs to wit beers, and what oats bring to the table. And frankly, I just brewed an ESB extra special bitter and added oats just for a bump of mouthfeel, right? Just to sneak in a little bit. So you put wheat in the mix, unmalted wheat and oats, and you're going to have that very pillowy, taste moussey, a little bit like you're on the clouds while you sip this type of feel. And so that's super fun about the ingredients, and yet it is very sessionable in lower alcohol. And then the flavor is what is added, these flavor agents that then the malted barley or unmalted barley becomes the backdrop for. This is another beer, just like Gozo, with coriander. Coriander, you don't want to have it soapy or the like. Coriander can be a very beautiful aspect of fresh herbs. And then Curacao, I'm going to pronounce it wrong because of my dyslexia.
Curacao.
Thank you. Curacao type of orange peel, which has a whole
Yeah.
process. You want to geek out, literally pursue how to make this orange peel. So you're going to dry that orange peel if you make it from scratch, or you're going to buy it dried. And it is a advanced version of what orange peel, the rind of an orange, can be done when you macerate and steep it in wonderful liqueurs. So that's what you've got, and it's an ale. So we should make important note. This is the Belgian ale category of BJCP guidelines that we're overviewing. So you've got some of that Belgian ale yeast characters. You're going to get both esters and also some phenols. We'll talk about that in aroma and flavor.
Yeah.
And it's not a very hop forward beer at all. Hops are basically more about the small low bitterness, not the flavor and aroma.
Yeah. When we talk about appearance, I opened one, and this is from Bermuda Craft Brewing, way out there in the Atlantic. Uh, but I bring this up. A friend of mine brews there, and I got a can of the stuff. It's absolutely delightful, but it's a little bit darker than you expect it to be. This is on the early stages of amber, but the typical version is a very pale. In fact, wit refers to being almost white, very pale, maybe to deep yellow, but it's meant to be kind of on the lighter spectrum and with the flavor profile that accompanies that color as well. Uh, we are looking at a little bit of haze. These beers tend to be a little bit hazy, the original hazy anyway, that and Weiss beer. But when we have these hazy IPAs, like, man, we've been doing that for years. Um, what I expect from a typical classic example is just a very dense, moussey. Think of like a cappuccino foam type of head on this, and it should persist for quite a while. The example I'm showing in the video is a little bit darker. It's not very much head, but it's still a wit beer. It's still drinkable. It's still enjoyable, and that just kind of it's just a good reminder that these are guidelines. They're not rules. They're not laws. They're not opinions that must be enforced. There's a spectrum, there's a continuum out there. So what just keep in mind that there's a difference there. Just note it and move on, and more importantly, move on to aroma.
Aroma. Aroma is what's going to invite you in this glass after you've
Hmm.
seen it walk across the room with somebody getting it served to them on a tray or pouring it into their glass. So your mind's all primed for it now. And you're going to get this essence of breadiness, right, from that unmalted wheat and the Pilsner malt. And it can go to honey, vanilla, right? Beautiful, beautiful, delicate flavors because of that. And in the aroma, you're also looking for some of the aromatics from the yeast that I did mention, almost maybe a sense of spiciness, right? And you're going to get that perfumey coriander. Coriander, I've called it before, it's what parsley wants to be when it grows up. It's not nearly as bland as parsley. You don't want it soapy. You want it to be kind of that bright, just cut from the garden. And it really is one of those aspects that almost makes you go in your mind towards thinking botanicals. So coriander is going to jump out of the glass. You're going to get a sense of that orange and that zest of orange that's going to be noticeable. It shouldn't be too dominant. Everything should dance with each other in a beautiful way. And then you're not going to really look for a lot of ethanol or alcohol on the aroma. That's going to be noticeable, maybe little prickle on the nose from the CO2, carbon dioxide, and ethanol, but nothing too dominant that distracts.
Yeah, when we get into flavor, and I want to talk about coriander specifically. You just brought it up. Let's lay into that because I had an issue with that. So let's talk about the beer first, and then we'll talk about coriander. This beer, because of the wheat in there, it's going to be kind of a malt and fermentation forward beer. It's going to have this just sweet, grainy flavor, but from the orange peel, it can be specifically orange zest, not so much lemon or any other citrus, but specifically orange because they're putting orange peel in there. But you get this light, wet dough kind of aspect to it. But you called it out too. It can have a little bit of honey, can have a little vanilla. So it's not all business. There is some sweetness there as well. This can be a crisp, dry finish of a beer. It's very refreshing. It's very wonderful, especially on a warm day. Um, the We're not going to get very much hops at all. I mean, it's none to low, and the hops that we're expecting is is going to be continental, maybe British hops is typically what the Belgians use classically. It's not about the hop flavor. There's next to no hop bitterness in there. That's really not the point. Uh, and you also brought up if there's a little bit of lactic tartness to it, that's also okay. It's not commonly going to be there, but it is perfectly allowed. So let's talk about this coriander. And I want to bring this up because I had an issue pulling coriander out of the crowd, so much so that when I was studying and doing blind tastings, preparing for advanced Cicerone, I would confuse this Belgian wit beer for other beers, and I was missing it. And so I got great advice by one of the master Cicerones of saying, go get some coriander, crush it, put it in a cup with some hot water, make a tea out of it, and just
Nice.
really experience that. And it was perfect. Now, keep in mind that coriander are basically cilantro seeds, and we all know what cilantro tastes like, especially if you love Mexican food. But the coriander seeds taste different. And what I found is, yes, there are some of us that are going to get perfume or soap out of it. And there are some of us that, on a lower level, it's going to be almost kind of like a woody, lemony flavor. And as we put more in there, it's going to be kind of like a woody celery flavor. And the more we put in there, it's going to start getting into like a savory ham like flavor. In a beer like this with coriander, we don't want celery. We don't want ham. We want that kind of herbal, woody lemon in there. And so when you taste these beers and you try to separate all the flavors that you're tasting in your mind and try to pull out that kind of like herbal, woody, lemony pop, that's coriander. And so it really helps to grab some coriander, crush it, put it in your mug, put some hot water in it, and really experience it because that created a flavor memory that I'll never forget. But I'm done with that. Let's talk about mouthfeel.
Mouthfeel is a little maddening when you look at the style guidelines based on how they word them, but it's straightforward if you get to know this beer style. So, grain of salt, kind of keep that in mind. Medium light to medium body. I guess that's understandable, but I see medium light is not nearly as often. I don't get a lot of dry, crisp wit beers, right? You're going to get medium body. And then I talked about like drinking it in the clouds, very pillowy, kind of almost moussey, like the collar of foam can elicit. And so you've got a mouthfeel essence of that kind of silkiness, sultriness, and a little bit more density than medium light, in my view. And yet also too, that kind of higher carbonation is going to help create some dryness. Some carbonic acid will help dry things out in the aftertaste and finish. And then, not harsh or astringent, not really, but I do get it when I work with wheat malt and drink beers with wheat malt, I get some tannins, right? I get an essence of those polyphenols and those tannins, that grippiness. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking for a little bit of astringency. And then the maddening sentence from the style guidelines is should not be overly dry or thin, nor should it be thick and heavy. What that's basically saying is what I just said. Listen to what you just heard. It's going to fall in the middle range for the mouthfeel, kind of the weight, the density, and the body.
Yeah, Goldilocks would love it. It's just
Yeah,
right.
way to summarize it all.
When we talk about styles, what does this compare to? This a great comparison for this beer, a Belgian wit, ironically, is a pale German Weiss beer. And just because there's wheat in it, it's hazy, it's drinkable. It kind of has a little lemony little pop or a citrus pop in there. But the Belgian wit is going to be a little bit different, whereas the German Weiss beer is going to get into like clove and banana. This is going to get into orange and that coriander that we just talked about. And so if you're tasting these blind side by side, look for those big clues that coriander and that orange are a big tip off that it's a wit beer. Another one that I kept confusing taste wise was this with the Belgian Pale. A Belgian Pale, we'll talk about different style cast, but think of it as like a British Pale, but with a Belgian phenolic character into it. Uh, the Belgian wit is very, very similar, especially blind. It's almost, you can't tell. That's where you have to really know your orange peel character, your coriander character, and even and just really key into that wheat character. And there's a lot of similarities, a lot of overlap, but those three things, the coriander, orange peel, and wheat character, are going to separate the Belgian Pale from the Belgian wit. Or excuse me, yeah, the Belgian Pale from the Belgian wit. So let's talk about the commercial examples.
And I love sharing this because I'm in kind of, if you listen to the show, you know, I live in the Boulder, Colorado area. And so I'm surrounded by two of the more well known, at least US versions, certainly Ode to Hogarden and the original brewers, St. Bernardus and the like. But
Mm,
Allagash and Allagash White comes up so much.
yep.
But you
So
really
good.
got Avery Brewing Company and their White Rascal
Yes.
showcasing itself so well and making a name. And then it's always back to back at the Great American Beer Festival, often awards for Allagash White, and then it goes to Avery and then Allagash White. And then sneaking along, certainly mentioned and always should be included is Omegang White or Omegang Wit, excuse me. And wit, is what you're looking for in often a lot of these named beers. And wit can mean white in many regions or versions of that. So I would say don't forget about Hogarden. If you're calibrating, that's the number one that you want to try and get. And just pay attention if you're getting this imported to whatever country that you are in from the country of origin. Just pay attention to freshness dates. This beer fresh is exactly
Mhm.
how you want it. This beer is not aged well, does not age well. And so you don't want these they'll go bland. It'll be a little bit, drab and less, more lifeless, less refreshing. I think often of drinking these beers on one day when I was trimming my apple tree and it was summer and I'm, clipping the branches and I was hot. It was like 90 degrees, front range of Colorado. And I go into my cooler in the garage and grabbed one of these. And boy, did it bring the garden to me, right? And then the tropics because of the orange peel. And I would say that this is a good story for your brain to remember. Don't drink these beers anything but fresh, and it'll bring you
Yep.
straight to the garden and the outdoors and refreshment.
Yep. And just understand that there are variations out there too. I mean, I just mentioned this. I'll show it. From Bermuda Craft Brewing. If you head out into that island in the Atlantic for vacation, you're going to have one of these out there. It's not going to be like Hoegaarden, but it's still wit and it's still beautiful. This Jolly Pumpkin that I have is a farmhouse version that's aged on oak, and so what a fun thing to play with. And so um, just keep in mind that you might find some variations that are not typical. Try them, drink them, enjoy them, but pull out the guidelines, listen to this while you drink it, and just understand that what the center of the bullseye is meant to be. Let's talk about some numbers. When this is one of those beers that is fairly drinkable. It's 4.5 to 5.5%. It's squarely in the average range. I consider average 4 to 6%. So this is 4.5 to 5.5. It's perfect. IBUs, again, this is not about the hops. We've got enough there to act as a preservative. So the IBUs consequently are going to be 8 to 20. Our original gravity, again, we just talked about the ABV. The original gravity is related to that. So we're looking at 1044 to 1052. If you're an original Plato type person, we're looking at 11 to 13. Where this really finishes and really drives home is that final gravity, that final Plato. For the final gravity is 1008 to 1012. If you have listened to other style casts, both Julie and I agree on this, that 1010 is kind of like that fence. And if you fall onto the lighter side of that, it's very light bodied. If you fall on the heavier side of that, then it's a little bit fuller bodied. This skirts that perfectly, 1008 to 1012. It's just perfect. It's got body without overdoing it. If you're final Plato, we're looking at 2 to 3. And then the last thing we mentioned is the color scale, the SRM in the US, we're looking at 2 to 4. That is really, really, really pale. I mean, having some yellow in there tops. And if you're an EBC or European Brewery Convention person, we're looking at 4 to 8. And so those are the numbers you can look for. That's the center of the bullseye. Some variation beyond that is perfectly acceptable. But let's talk about the glass. Let's talk about the temp as well that we want to drink this.
Yeah, and I land in the same place often with this level ABV range style beers. I like them colder. I want that colder, right out of the fridge type of taste. I don't need this to warm up. It's meant for refreshment, and it's going to be enjoyable at those cold refrige temperatures. So I would go with that. And you're going to see, I mean, any beer brand that's normal from Belgium, at least, will always have its own branded glass. So if you're
Mhm.
drinking Hogarden, you're going to find a Hogarden glass probably sold worldwide. And so go for that type of glass. But I'm flexible in this. A Belgian style tulip would be perfect for me. It's got a little bit of it's got a foot, it's got a stem, it's got a little bit of place where I can put my hand around it if I don't want to just hold the stem. And so that's what I would go with, is more of a hybrid glass of the Belgian tulip.
Yeah, yeah. If I don't have French jelly glass or water glass, which I don't, and I don't need one of those drinking in, but that's typical. And I prefer a stem for this beer for the same reason. I want to keep it cold, and I want to control that. But let's talk about food pairing. And I've got to say that, I mean, this beer is meant to go with mussels, if you ask me. And at least right now I'm the guy with the microphone, so I got to say this is perfect with mussels. I cook mussels in Witbier, and it is gorgeous. So mussels, basically any seafood. This is light. This is refreshing. This is phenolic. It adds to the flavor profile. Um, this is a warm weather type of beer. I want this with a summer salad. I'd love this with a BLT sandwich. One of my favorite sandwiches in all the world for all time is the Cubano, and this beer would add just a wonderful kind of like it's not tropical flavor, but add just kind of that essence of the flavors to keep that mindset of the Cubano in a tropical realm. And if I wanted to go a little bit bigger, maybe some chicken enchiladas with a verde sauce, not the spicy red sauce, but the verde sauce would be interesting. I don't know if that would work for sure, but I would love to try it.
So I want this for breakfast, very sessionable. I want it
Yeah.
with poached eggs, right? And
Mm.
toasted sourdough bread that has been slathered in butter, like easy one.
Yeah.
And staying on the breakfast train, spinach Florentine, kind of maybe with a quiche style thing with this. The wit beer could act as that kind of bread crust on a quiche, which would be nice. I like the idea of spinach actually marrying and find its way, bridging and hooking over to the coriander. So I've got my mind on breakfast with
Oh
these with
yeah.
these.
And a Witmosa sounds amazing for brunch as well. So
Wit Mosa, dude, totally. Sneak in some
totally.
OJ, sneak in some cranberry juice, right? A
Oh,
little bit of a kind of fruited syrup would be super fun. Don't forget any of these beer styles, and we're sobs, not snobs, is our new thing, right?
I
We're sense of beer
love it.
style people, and you're one of them now listening. We're studying guidelines to better ourselves, whether you're testing for BJCP, Cicerone, a beer buyer, a beer educator, or an appreciator that just really wants to kind of grow your gastronomic enjoyment from beer. But we are not snobs about the fact that you can take any beer, even though it's a base style, and just create something totally new. And so sneak things into this. I picture myself sitting with fresh sliced apples, right? And maybe drizzling some apple juice into my wit and seeing where that goes as well. There's lots of options.
Yeah, just I love this because it's not about how much of this information you know. It's not about how much of this you can memorize and dazzle all your friends at the next party of how you can remember all the vital stats. Good for you. What really matters is how well you enjoy this experience and share this experience with your friends. And that's where I love this tagline that you brought up, Julia, is that, be a sob, have a sense of beer style, because that just has some moxie to it. And I love it. I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Have a sense, but don't be militant about it. Once you have your sense, you can go off to many places.
Right on. I'll drink to that. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to A Sense of Beer Style, the essential beer style training for those who want to lead in food and beverage. With advanced Cicerones, me, Julia,
And me, Jeremy.
tune into the next episode as we continue exploring the world of beer styles and what to make of them. We encourage you to listen to the prepisodes to build your foundation and better understand beer styles.
And before the next episode, I'd like to ask you to review the show and let us know what you'd like featured in upcoming episodes. Until next time, here's to you and your sense of beer style. Thank you for listening. Cheers.